I still remember the sound of laughter echoing in the break room that day, the clink of soda cans, the chatter about weekend plans, the careless joy that fills an ordinary Monday. I placed the lunchbox my daughter-in-law had packed for me on the table, smiling at the mix-up. It was Benjamin's container, not mine, and everyone leaned closer, teasing me as white crystals glimmered along the rim. "Looks like a cocktail glass, ma'am," one joked, and the room erupted again. For a second, it felt light, harmless. But then David stepped forward. He wasn't laughing. His hands, steady from years as a doctor, trembled as he tilted the box toward the fluorescent light. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked almost gray. The room fell silent. My heart stuttered. "Who prepared this meal?" he asked. His voice was low, deadly serious. "My daughter-in-law," I answered slowly, the warmth I usually felt for Clara cracking under the weight of his gaze. "Why?" David's jaw clenched. He looked at me with eyes that carried both fear and urgency. And then he said the words that shattered everything I thought was safe in my world. "Take your son to the hospital right now, or he won't survive." The laughter was gone. In its place, the fluorescent light hummed like a warning siren. My hands shook as I clutched the container, the sugar crystals catching the light like shards of ice. Suddenly, the air in that room felt unbreathable, heavy with a terror I couldn't name yet. That was the moment my life split in two, before the lunchbox and after. If you've ever wondered what betrayal tastes like, stay with me. I'm going to tell you how one meal nearly destroyed my family, and how a mother's love fought back. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this truth can travel. And if this story grips your heart, subscribe to Roots and Secrets so you don't miss what comes next. Because what I discovered at the hospital would chill me to the bone. The ride to the University of Maryland Medical Center blurred past in fragments of noise and color. My driver's voice asking if I was all right, the shriek of a horn on K Street, sunlight bouncing hard off the glass towers, none of it registered. My fingers clenched around the plastic bag that held the lunchbox like it was evidence of a crime. In truth, it was. When I stepped into the hospital, the air hit me with that sterile blend of bleach and cold air conditioning. A nurse behind the desk adjusted her glasses as I stammered out what had happened. Before she could respond, the phone rang. I heard David's voice on the other end, low and urgent, confirming my story. Within minutes, a lab tech whisked away the container. I sat in the waiting room, the plastic chairs sticky against the back of my legs. The PA system droned names, code blues, instructions I couldn't understand. All I could hear was David's command repeating inside my head. "Take your son to the hospital right now, or he won't survive." Time stretched like torture. I clasped my hands together so tightly my knuckles turned white. On the wall, the second hand of the clock seemed to mock me with each deliberate tick. My mind filled with images of Benjamin, his boyish grin when he graduated, his tired voice last week telling me it was just work stress, the nights he rubbed his stomach absently, signs I had ignored. Finally, a man in a white coat appeared. His tag read Dr. Ethan Miller. His expression was professional, but his eyes softened when he looked at me. "Ma'am," he said, holding a sheet of paper. "We ran the tests." He paused, and my stomach dropped before he even finished. "It's arsenic, chronic poisoning, consistent with fatigue, stomach pain, nausea. If your son has been eating this for weeks or months, there's significant damage already." The word arsenic cut through me like a blade. The fluorescent light above us flickered once, and I swear it felt like the ground tilted beneath my feet. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I couldn't breathe. I whispered. "Are you certain?" The doctor's nod was slow, deliberate. "Yes, he needs immediate medical evaluation. If he's been consuming these meals prepared the same way, his life is at serious risk." I thanked him, but the words came out strangled. Walking back to the car, my legs felt like stone. The world outside bustled, vendors calling, taxis honking, but it all seemed muffled, as though I were moving underwater. I sat in the back seat clutching the lab report, and one name pulsed in my mind with every beat of my heart. Clara. Sweet, attentive Clara. The girl who had laughed in my kitchen that very morning, ponytails swinging as she stirred a pan. The one I had once told friends was more like a daughter than an in-law. How could the same hands that tucked fruit into Benjamin's lunch also sprinkle poison? Still, I fought the thought. It was impossible. She loves him, I told myself. She loves us both. But when I reached Mr. Harrison's law office that afternoon, dread turned to certainty. The leather chair creaked as I sat down. He laid a thick file on the desk, his glasses sliding down his nose as he turned to the section marked Inheritance Distribution. My eyes locked on one clause. If Benjamin died before me, Clara would inherit not just his estate, but eventually mine. My pulse roared in my ears. The letters on the page seemed to glow, cruel and absolute. Harrison explained the clause calmly, but his words blurred. Sole heir, gradual transfer, shortest path to everything. Pieces clicked together like jagged glass. Her questions about my properties in Milan, her sudden interest in my Hampton investments, the way she once smiled at dinner and said, "If you're not in charge someday, I'll continue the brand, won't I?" At the time, I had laughed, touched by her ambition. Now it sounded like a confession I had been too blind to hear. Driving home, the city lights blurred through my tears. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had dipped low, casting the porch in gold. Clara sat there scrolling her phone, her smile radiant as she looked up. "You're home, Mom. I was just booking us a spa day. They have the most relaxing massage package." Her voice was honey, but I tasted only ash. I forced a smile, murmured an excuse, and slipped past her into the house before she could see the tremor in my hands. In the living room, I collapsed onto the couch, pressing my palms against my temples. My mind screamed with contradictions. The Clara who made soup when Benjamin was ill versus the Clara who might be plotting to inherit everything. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lunchbox glimmering with white crystals, heard David's urgent voice, felt the cold certainty in Dr. Miller's tone. By dawn, I was resolved. Benjamin had to know. I dressed in the dark blue blouse he once said made me look strong. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove to his office. When he saw me, his smile was so carefree it broke my heart. He joked lightly, but the words caught in my throat. In his private office, I laid the lab report and the will on his desk. His laughter died as he read. I watched the color drain from his face the same way it had drained from David's. His hands trembled so violently the paper rustled. "Arsenic in my food?" he whispered, voice cracking. I told him everything, how I had received his container by mistake, how David had recognized the crystals, the doctor's confirmation, the will that gave Clara every reason. Each word was a dagger, but I spoke them slowly because they had to be heard. Benjamin buried his face in his hands. "No," he said over and over. "She loves me. She cooks for me. She takes care of me." His denial was a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to shield him, to pretend it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence sat between us in black and white. Finally, he slammed his fist on the desk. Rage bled through his grief. "If this is true, then she not only betrayed me, she wants to destroy our family." His eyes met mine, a storm of pain and fury. I took his hand. "We can't face her alone. We must go to the police." He hesitated, torn between love and survival, but then he nodded, tears shining. "Mom, I'll do what you say. Let's unmask her. That night, as I lay awake listening to the hum of the house, one thought pounded in my head. The daughter-in-law I had once embraced as my own child might be plotting to kill the only son I had left. And the walls of our home no longer felt like safety. They felt like a trap closing in. The air inside the precinct smelled of burnt coffee and old paper, as if the walls had absorbed years of secrets. Benjamin and I sat across from Inspector Carter, his silvering hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. He listened without interruption as I described the lunchbox, the hospital, the will. His pen scratched steadily across a yellow pad. When Benjamin added details about his fatigue, Carter's eyes narrowed. "This is a serious case," he said finally, his voice steady but edged with steel. "We'll take the container as evidence, but you must understand, if your suspicions are correct, your daughter-in-law will not hesitate to try again. For now, we'll keep this confidential. Cameras will be installed discreetly in your kitchen. We'll collect more samples, but you cannot, under any circumstances, let her suspect we are watching." Benjamin's jaw tightened, his hands balled into fists against his knees. "Understood," he said, though his voice was low, ragged with hurt. We walked out into the parking lot. Washington traffic roared around us, but the world felt eerily quiet. Benjamin leaned against the car, his shoulders hunched. He looked like a boy again, smaller somehow, as if the betrayal had hollowed him out. "Mom," he whispered. "I never imagined that the person I share a bed with could be planning my death. But for you, for the company, for our family, I'll be strong." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the tremor in his body. "We'll get through this, son," I murmured, though my heart ached with doubt. Because how does one recover from realizing love might have been a mask all along? That night at home, Clara greeted us with her usual brightness. "Long day?" she asked, slipping her arms around Benjamin's waist. He stiffened under her touch, and my chest tightened. I busied myself in the kitchen, but from the corner of my eye, I caught her glance, sharp, assessing. She was looking for cracks. Later, when she served dinner, she set Benjamin's plate in front of him first, the steam curling up from the soup. My throat tightened as I watched. Was this bowl a gift or a weapon? I forced myself to smile, reaching for a spoon. "I'm too old for heavy meals," I said lightly, sliding the dish back. "Let your husband eat this. I'll take just broth." For the briefest second, her smile froze and her hand trembled. Then she recovered, laughing softly. "Of course, Mom." But the flicker of panic in her eyes was unmistakable. The next morning, Benjamin found me in the kitchen. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. He lowered his voice so she couldn't hear. "Mom, the food. It tastes strange lately. Bitter soup. Orange juice cloudy." His words stabbed me deeper than any knife. I squeezed his hand. "Don't eat it. From now on, we'll control what goes into your body. She won't get another chance." By then, Inspector Carter's team had installed the hidden camera in the pantry. A small lens, invisible to the untrained eye, but powerful enough to record every movement. I watched the feed from a monitor at a nearby precinct office. The first evening nearly broke me. Clara stood in the kitchen, hair tied back, apron neat. She opened a small glass vial, tilting it carefully, letting a white powder trickle into the simmering soup. Her face was calm, almost serene. Not a flicker of hesitation. She stirred slowly, humming faintly, as though this were nothing more than seasoning. My nails dug into the wooden armrest of the chair until I thought the skin would tear. I wanted to burst through the screen, to scream at her, but Carter's hand pressed firmly against my shoulder. Easy, Mrs. Wallace, he said. She's giving us what we need. She won't escape. I nodded, though fury burned hot in my chest. Watching her ladle poison with such ease felt like watching my world collapse in real time. That night, Benjamin played his part. He tasted the soup, then pressed a hand to his head, groaning. He collapsed onto the couch, feigning dizziness. Clara rushed to him, her voice dripping concern. "You've been working too much, love. Let me get you water." But her eyes, God help me, her eyes glittered with something closer to satisfaction. I turned my back, pretending to busy myself with dishes, tears stinging my eyes. My son was acting, but I knew the deeper pain he carried wasn't staged. Every smile of hers had become a blade. The police collected the leftovers, analyzing them with clinical precision. The next day, Carter called me into his office. He slid a sheet of paper across the desk. "The arsenic concentration is double that of the previous container. She's escalating." My breath caught. Double. She wasn't merely maintaining her plan. She was accelerating, desperate before she lost her chance. From that moment, every meal became a battlefield. Clara served Benjamin first, always with a tender smile. One afternoon, I intercepted. "I'm thirsty, dear. Could you bring me a glass of orange juice?" She hesitated, just slightly, then poured from the same jug. Her hands shook as she passed me the glass. "Here you go, Mom." I smiled, meeting her eyes. "Thank you, darling, but suddenly, I'd prefer water." Her lips tightened, but she forced a laugh. Of course, she thought she was subtle. She wasn't. Each time I refused her offerings, each time Benjamin winced theatrically at work to keep up the ruse, we were pulling the noose tighter around her. But it came at a cost. Benjamin grew quieter. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ceiling late at night, his face shadowed. "I loved her, Mom," he whispered once. "Even now, some part of me still does." I held his hand, my own heart splitting. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Still, I understood his torment. Clara had been his partner, his confidant. Now she was his predator. The betrayal carved wounds deeper than any poison. The breaking point came after dinner one night. Clara excused herself, claiming a spa appointment. As she crossed the garden, I heard her voice, low and hurried on the phone. "We can't wait another month. We have to act now." My blood froze. I coughed loudly, stepping outside as though by chance. She startled, eyes wide, then plastered on a smile. "My appointment was changed. I'll stay in tonight." Her mask was cracking. I returned to my room, every nerve vibrating. That night, standing in the hallway, I heard her silhouette pacing inside her room. Her voice floated through the thin walls. "I have to finish this before the old lady signs the new will." I pressed my back against the doorframe, trembling. It was no longer suspicion. It was confession. I recorded her words, sending them to Carter. His reply came within minutes. "We're almost there." But even with evidence stacking, the risk grew unbearable. Carter proposed the unthinkable, a staged collapse, a false death, a trap that would rip the mask from her face once and for all. Benjamin's expression was tight when Carter explained. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. "If we wait longer, she'll succeed. And Mom, she'll come after you too." My chest tightened at his words. My brave, broken boy, ready to endure more pain to protect me. That was the night we crossed the threshold. No longer waiting, no longer denying. We had chosen to fight. And as I lay in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, I realized there was no going back. The next move would change everything. The house no longer felt safe. Every corner, every sound carried a hidden threat. The tick of the hallway clock, the whisper of Clara's footsteps. Even the scrape of a chair across the kitchen floor filled me with unease. I moved through the rooms like a stranger, watching the shadows, my chest tight with dread. Nights stretched endlessly, and even sleep refused to grant mercy. Benjamin, my son, had taken on the role Carter gave him, and he played it well, perhaps too well. At work, he complained of headaches and fatigue, earning sympathetic glances from colleagues. At home, he rubbed his stomach, grimaced, and lay down on the couch as though poisoned already. The act worked, but it drained him. I saw the toll etched into his face. His shoulders, once squared with confidence, now sagged under the burden. One night, I heard a muffled sob behind his door. I pressed my hand against the wood, aching to go in, aching to hold him like I had when he was a boy. But I stopped myself. My son was fighting demons larger than I could reach, and my presence might only deepen his pain. Inspector Carter was relentless. Each meeting added another layer of grim certainty. His reports were filled with cold numbers and toxicology terms, but their meaning was simple. Clara was dosing the food with increasing levels of arsenic. "She's accelerating," Carter said one afternoon, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. "If Benjamin were actually consuming these meals, we'd already be too late." The words tore through me. My breath caught, and I clutched the report so tightly the paper crumpled. I whispered, "She's desperate." Carter gave no reply, but his silence said enough. That evening, Clara served soup with her usual smile. She set the bowl in front of Benjamin, her voice warm, almost tender. "I made your favorite." Benjamin lifted the spoon, but let it fall back into the bowl. "I don't have an appetite tonight," he muttered. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. Her eyes flickered with something sharp, then smoothed again into sweetness. "Then I'll save it for tomorrow." Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. The word echoed like a threat. I excused myself and climbed upstairs. My chest burned with pressure, my mind spinning. I collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling as tears blurred my vision. The house was silent, except for the thudding of my own heart. 10 years I had lived without my husband, building a company from the ground up, sacrificing joy for the future of my son. And now, everything. My life's work, my legacy, my child, balanced on Clara's greed. Alone in the dark, I whispered a plea I had never spoken aloud. "God, do not take him from me. Not like this." Morning light crept into the kitchen where Benjamin sat, pale and quiet. He pushed aside the breakfast Clara had left, waiting until she left the room before speaking. "Mom, what if she succeeds?" His voice trembled. "What if we're already too late?" The despair in his eyes cut deeper than any poison. I reached for him, cupping his face in my hands. "We won't let her," I said, forcing strength into my words. "Do you hear me? We will not." My voice shook, but I refused to surrender. Later that day, Carter summoned us again. The precinct was dim, the walls lined with files that smelled of paper and old coffee. Beside him sat Dr. Laura Wilson, a woman with calm eyes and a surgeon's precision. She spread out a plan across the table. Benjamin would collapse during dinner, an ambulance would arrive, the hospital would be prepared with hidden cameras, and Clara would be lured into revealing herself. Carter's voice was even, but his gaze bore into us. "This is dangerous, but it may be the only way to end it." Benjamin sat silently, his hands trembling against his knees. I waited for him to refuse, to shake his head, to cling to the last remnants of love for his wife. Instead, he lifted his chin and met Carter's eyes. "I'll do it," he said. His voice cracked, but did not break. If this is what it takes to protect my mother and myself, I'll go through with it. I swallowed hard. Pride and sorrow warred within me. My son was offering to fake his own death, to watch his wife gloat over his supposed end, just to save us both. I wanted to gather him in my arms, to say he had carried enough, but instead I nodded, because we had no choice. Clara had left us no choice. That night, back in my room, the weight of despair pressed heavily once more. Yet beneath the fear, something shifted. Clara believed she had cornered me, believed I was blind with affection, too soft to see the truth. She was wrong. The hopelessness that had wrapped around me like chains began to crack. In its place, a fire stirred. A mother's fire. Clara had underestimated not only Benjamin's resilience but also mine. The fear remained, sharp and heavy. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I whispered into the night, not in surrender, but in defiance. We will fight. Sleep would not come easily. Every hour, I rose from the bed and paced the floor, haunted by the thought of Clara moving silently in the dark, her smile ready, her hands prepared. I thought of the lunches she once packed with cheerful chatter, the tenderness I believed was love. How easily I had been fooled. Each memory twisted into a blade, cutting deeper. In my mind, I saw Benjamin as a child, clutching his teddy bear, whispering that monsters lived under the bed. Back then, I could banish them with a hug. Now the monster wore perfume and a wedding ring, and no embrace could drive her away. The despair pressed so heavily that I nearly collapsed. But then Carter's voice returned to me, steady, certain. We will end this. His conviction was the rope I clung to. Even as doubt coiled around my heart, I repeated his words. We would end this. Clara's mask would fall. I rose from bed, pulled the curtains aside, and stared into the city lights. The glass towers glittered like indifferent stars. Somewhere out there, people laughed, ate, and loved without fear. I envied them, but I also drew strength from the thought that one day Benjamin and I might rejoin that world. We would not live forever in the shadow of poison. Before sleep finally claimed me, I placed my hand over my heart and listened to its beat. It was slow, steady, defiant. That sound reminded me that as long as I lived, Benjamin would not stand alone. Clara thought she was hunting him, but in truth, she had awakened me. The night of the performance arrived like a storm I could not avoid. The hours leading to dinner passed in agonizing slowness, each tick of the clock echoing through the house like a countdown. I busied myself in the kitchen, arranging plates, pouring wine, setting the table as though everything were normal. But inside my chest, my heart drummed so hard it threatened to shatter my ribs. Tonight was the night Benjamin would collapse, and the world we knew would be ripped apart. Clara floated through the house with practiced ease, her ponytail bouncing, her lips curved in a smile that masked calculation. She set the soup pot in the center of the table, her eyes shining with a brightness I no longer trusted. Eat, my love, she said to Benjamin, placing the bowl before him. I made this especially for you. The spoon gleamed in the light. The broth shimmered innocently, yet my stomach churned as if I could already taste the bitterness of poison. Benjamin lifted the spoon, pretending to sip. Then he set it down and pressed a hand to his chest. His face paled, his eyes rolled, and his body slumped sideways, knocking over a glass of water that shattered against the floor. I cried out, the sound raw and jagged. Benjamin! My scream shook the air and tears spilled, not all of them fake. For even though this was staged, seeing my son motionless nearly broke me. I ran to his side, shaking him, wailing. Clara rushed forward too, covering her mouth with her hands. "No! Benjamin!" she cried, her voice quivering. Yet beneath the sobs I caught the faintest flicker of relief in her eyes. She believed she had won. I dialed my phone, shouting into it, pretending to call for an ambulance. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside, growing louder until they filled the street. Paramedics in crisp uniforms stormed through the door. They loaded Benjamin onto a stretcher, his face ghostly pale, his chest unmoving, wires attached to machines that simulated a flatline. Clara clung to my arm. "I must go with him. I'm his wife." One officer barred her path. "Only one family member can accompany the patient," he said firmly. I placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Stay here, my dear. I'll go with Benjamin." She nodded reluctantly, her hands shaking, her expression strangely conflicted. Relief, grief, anticipation, all swirled together. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and we sped through the city streets, lights flashing red across glass buildings. I clutched Benjamin's hand, whispering, "You're doing well, son. Hold on." His eyes fluttered open just long enough to meet mine, and in that glance I saw both pain and determination. He squeezed my hand once before closing his eyes again, returning to his role. My chest ached with love and sorrow. At the University of Maryland Medical Center, everything was prepared. Hidden cameras recorded every angle. Dr. Wilson stood by with forged charts that told a story of cardiac arrest and fatal poisoning. Machines beeped slowly, simulating the dying gasp of a life slipping away. Benjamin lay beneath white sheets, his face pale with makeup, his chest still. I sat beside him, tears streaming freely now, because though I knew he lived, the sight was unbearable. I texted Clara, "Come quickly, Benjamin didn't make it." My fingers trembled as I pressed send, the message feeling like a stone hurled into the abyss. Then I waited. The hallway echoed with footsteps. 40 minutes later, Clara arrived, her hair disheveled, one heel broken, mascara streaking her cheeks. She rushed toward me crying, "It can't be! Benjamin was so young!" Her sobs were loud, dramatic, practiced. I held her, rigid as stone, my hands trembling not from grief but rage. "Calm down, my dear," I whispered hoarsely. "He's inside. Come see him one last time." We entered the room where Benjamin lay motionless. Machines flickered faintly, recording false data. Clara's hands shook as she touched his arm. "My love," she cried, but her eyes glimmered with a strange light. Relief, as if a burden had been lifted. Then she leaned down and whispered, so faint I nearly doubted my ears, "Finally, it's over." The microphone hidden nearby caught every word. My blood turned to ice. She bit her lip instantly, as if realizing her mistake, but it was too late. Benjamin's eyes flew open. He sat up abruptly, tearing wires from his chest. "Over?" he repeated, his voice like ice. Clara screamed, stumbling backward. "No, it can't be. You were dead." Her words dissolved into panic. Her face drained of color as she backed against the wall. "I was careful," she cried. Benjamin's voice thundered. "Careful to kill me?" The door burst open. Inspector Carter entered with 3 officers. His voice was firm. "We've heard enough. Clara Wallace, you are under arrest for attempted murder." The officers closed in, blocking every exit. Clara's knees buckled. She gasped, shaking her head violently. No, you don't understand. I didn't mean to." Carter held up a USB stick. "The recordings from your kitchen, the toxicology results, your whispered confession just now. It's all here. Clara crumpled to the floor, covering her face with her hands. I just wanted the money. I didn't want to kill him. It was supposed to look natural. Her sobs filled the sterile room, mixing with the steady hum of machines. Benjamin stepped forward, fists clenched, tears burning in his eyes. You wanted to steal everything. You wanted to destroy my family. His voice cracked, but the fury within it shook the air. The officers cuffed her hands behind her back. Carter's voice was merciless. You'll answer for this in court. They dragged her toward the hallway. Clara looked back at me, her eyes wide, pleading. Mom, please! But I shook my head, my throat burning. You chose this path. You betrayed us all. As they led her away, silence pressed over the room. Benjamin collapsed into my arms, shaking, his tears soaking my blouse. We did it, Mom, he whispered. We turned the tables. I held him tightly, feeling his heartbeat, the very rhythm I had feared I would lose forever. Later, we were taken to an observation room, a two-way mirror separating us from the interrogation chamber where Clara now sat. Her hair hung limp, her face pale, her wrists cuffed against the cold metal table. Inspector Carter sat across from her, calm and relentless. Tell us the truth, he urged. At first she protested, shouting about conspiracies and lies, but then Carter placed the glass vial on the table. What is this? Salt? Sugar? Or arsenic? Clara's eyes widened. Sweat glistened on her brow. She faltered, her voice thin. I just wanted him weak. I wanted the fortune. I never... Her words dissolved into sobs. Carter pressed on, turning on a screen that displayed the video from the hidden camera. Clara watched herself pour the white powder into soup, her face blank, her movements careful. She shook her head violently, whispering, That can't be me. But the truth was undeniable. Finally, her voice broke. Yes, I did it. I researched it. I bought it. I thought no one would notice. Her confession sealed her fate. Benjamin beside me clenched his fists, trembling with fury and heartbreak. I laid a hand on his arm, whispering, Let the law finish this. Don't let her take more of you. When the officers signed the papers, Carter looked at us through the glass. His nod was solemn, but his words were victorious. It's over. I exhaled for the first time in weeks, the weight lifting slightly from my chest. Clara was exposed, her schemes shattered, her lies stripped bare. The house she had poisoned with fear was no longer her weapon. It was ours again. But even in victory, sorrow lingered. I had welcomed her once as a daughter, and now she left as a criminal. Still, as I held Benjamin's hand in that sterile observation room, I knew the fight had turned. For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself to believe we would survive. When we finally stepped outside the hospital, the night air struck cold against my skin. The city hummed with ordinary life, cars rushing by, laughter drifting from a nearby cafe, the smell of roasted chestnuts lingering in the wind. Yet nothing was ordinary anymore. I felt older, heavier, as though the hours inside had stolen years. Benjamin walked beside me, his steps unsteady, but his hand found mine. For a moment we stood still under a streetlight, its glow pale and unforgiving, and I realized that survival does not come without scars. But scars are proof of endurance. The headlines spread faster than I could absorb them. Young socialite arrested for attempted poisoning. The story was everywhere. On the morning news, in the business pages, whispered over coffee in Washington cafes. Clara's name became a stain, her smile replayed on screens not as charm, but as evidence of deceit. My phone buzzed with messages of shock, pity, outrage, but no one could grasp the fracture inside me. I had once called her my daughter. I had once trusted her to protect what I held most dear. Now her face stared back from newsprint as a criminal. Benjamin withdrew from the world for weeks. The board at his firm rallied to stabilize the company, and though his position remained secure, whispers followed him into every meeting. At night, I found him on the balcony, staring at the skyline with eyes dulled by betrayal. "How do I live after this?" he asked once, his voice barely audible. "You live," I told him simply, "because you still can, because you survived what was meant to end you." My words trembled, but I meant them. Survival itself was a victory. The police investigation dragged through hearings and statements. I attended each one, sitting behind glass, watching Clara hunched in handcuffs, her once glossy hair limp, her silk blouses replaced by gray uniforms. There was no trace of the woman who had planned spa trips and dinner parties. The courtroom lights were harsh, and every time she lifted her gaze toward me, her eyes pleaded. I did not return the look. The sentencing came with solemn finality. Years in prison. Attempted murder was not something society forgave easily. Clara wept openly as the verdict echoed, but I felt no triumph. Only emptiness. Punishment could not erase the scars she left in my family. Yet, from the ashes of that pain, a new resolve formed. I took the staged idea of philanthropy, the orphanage I had once mentioned only to bait her, and made it real. I redirected a large share of my perfume company's profits to create a foundation for women silenced inside their own homes, women who endured abuse or manipulation in shadows. If my suffering could become light for someone else, then it would not have been wasted. Benjamin supported me quietly, his presence steady even as he healed. Over months, his health returned, the traces of arsenic fading from his body. But the deeper wounds lingered. Sometimes I caught him flinching at the smell of soup or pushing a glass of juice away without thinking. Trust, once shattered, does not mend overnight. One evening, we sat together on the balcony, the city glowing under a red dusk. He took my hand, his grip strong again. "Mom," he said, "thank you for saving me. Thank you for refusing to look away." His voice was warm, but I heard the echo of pain beneath it. I smiled faintly, though tears welled. "I only did what a mother must. I couldn't bear to lose you." We sat in silence as the sun sank. The years of sacrifice, the lonely nights after my husband's death, the endless work to build a company, all of it coalesced into this moment. I had kept my son alive, and that mattered more than anything. Clara's greed had buried her, but love, stubborn, fierce, imperfect love, had carried us through. I whispered into the fading light, words I hoped would root themselves in Benjamin's heart. "Tin you without respect is nothing but an echo. It sounds loud, but it never lasts." He squeezed my hand tighter, and for the first time in months, I felt a fragile peace. The scars remained, but so did we. And now I turn to you, listening to my voice. What would you have done, standing in my place? Would you have stayed silent to preserve the illusion of family? Or would you have risked everything to protect truth? I want to hear your thoughts, because every story is a candle for someone else in the dark. If this journey touched you, share your own, and let me know from where in the world you are listening. And if you want to walk with us through more stories of survival, betrayal, and resilience, join Roots and Secrets. Because here, every truth matters, and no voice should ever be silenced.